Those protests in Cuba a year ago were the biggest in the history of the 60-year-old Castro revolution.
And many predicted that the government there would be forced to respond with some reforms. But has anything really changed? We want to ask Professor Michael Bustamante. He is professor of history, University of Miami, and the Emilio Bacardi Moreau Chair in Cuban and Cuban American Studies.
Welcome.
Professor Bustamante, welcome, Michael. We're glad you're here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so we have seen what the Diaz-Canel government did in the past year. Is there any hope that, in fact, they would be less repressive if people come out on the streets tomorrow in Havana and Santiago de Cuba and all over the island?
Not really. I haven't seen many people raising a ton of expectations that we're going to see, anything like what happened a year ago tomorrow, despite the fact that it's the anniversary. I think it's safe to say that given the last year of a very intense punitive response from the government, any similar activities that might be planned for tomorrow would be met with a similar response.
You know, that's such an interesting concept because 1 year ago sometimes seems like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? But really, not that long ago, certainly South Florida and the world watched in amazement as all of these people, really in a grassroots, unplanned way, bubbled up against the government for whatever their reasons, economic, social. And there was some real, including from you, according to past articles, some real expectation that this was a watershed moment with change on the way, especially with social media and internet now involved. What happened?
Well, I think it still was a watershed moment, whatever the results have been. I mean, nothing like it had happened in 60 years. Nothing like it might happen for a while, and that doesn't make it not a watershed moment. I think it was historic for perhaps the obvious reasons, right? But what has happened since is not only a punitive response. There's been a mass migration. I think one of the key contextual factors that contributed, at least in part, to what we saw a year ago was the fact that at that moment, Cuba, in terms of the pandemic on the healthcare side of that issue, was at its worst moment. Since then, there's been a vaccination campaign that has been successful by most estimations. And so that, I think, combined with the opening of borders, frankly, since November, has served to kind of decrease pressure inside, and people are seeking horizons elsewhere. That plus the punitive response from the government has, I think, put us where we are today.
Yeah. Michael, we see yesterday that Secretary of State Anthony Blinken announced that there are going to be 28 Cuban officials who are going to have visa restrictions imposed on them. But isn't that kind of an empty gesture? I mean, these Cubans did not want to travel to the United States in the first place, but it seems like a symbolic a gesture, but it seems somewhat empty, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. And it's not the first gesture of that kind that we've seen from the Biden administration since the events a year ago. The Biden administration has, in a sense, taken a kind of a novel approach in terms of US-Cuba policy in applying targeted sanctions on individuals in the government, right, rather than on blanket institutions or blanket sort of ways of the United States engaging. One might say that could be meaningful were it not for the most comprehensive sanctions, general sanctions policies that we have virtually in any country around the world, right, which makes the impact of those targeted sanctions, I think, lesser and makes them seem, symbolic and perhaps empty gestures.
So what is then the pressure from your bird's eye view? What is the way to pressure the Cuban government? And should we be?
This goes toward a longer debate about US-Cuba policy that's certainly has ups and downs. We've been through a particularly sort of intense yo-yo, I would say, of approaches over the past decade, from the normalization or the attempt to normalize relations under the Obama administration to the imposition of a quote unquote maximum pressure campaign under the Trump administration. And, my bird's eye view as a historian is that it's actually not the United States that's going to change the future of Cuba. Whether that's a sanctions policy, or whether that's a quote unquote engagement policy. My own view is that one of the things that I think fuels what sort of loyalty there may be to the Cuban government is this idea of this kind of internal contest with the hegemonic power 90 miles away. So I've long argued that I think in a big picture scenario, the United States sort of needs to take itself out of the game as the boogeyman in Cuba's internal affairs. And in that, I think it would make it more difficult for the Cuban government to essentially blame all of its problems on the United States as it tends to do today.
Yeah. Michael, we obviously know that the Biden administration has a lot on its plate when it comes to foreign policy, war in Ukraine principally among them. But who is driving U.S. policy towards Cuba right now? Because during the Trump era, Marco Rubio had a huge voice in the direction of the president, what he wanted in Cuba. Who is doing that now, if anybody? Senator Menendez from New Jersey, or who is it?
Well, until recently, I would say Senator Menendez. I mean, I think Senator Menendez still has an influential voice with the Biden administration, in part because of that ever delicate balance in the Senate, right? And so the Biden administration, since coming in, despite campaign promises to lift many of the increased sanctions that the Trump administration had put in place, they were very wary of crossing Senator Menendez, right? And I think that remained the case leading up to July 11th and certainly after. But who's driving recent changes in U.S.-Cuba policy? I think it's Cuban migrants. Right. The fact that we've had 140,000 Cubans that have come to the country since October, a historic exodus, really, that changed the calculus. And the Biden administration decided that they needed to do something to try to alleviate some of the economic pressure. I'm not convinced that it's going to work, but that's really driving recent decisions.
Yeah, I'm sure you are right. And we're glad that you brought that up. We're going to try to get to it, but you got there. So thanks very much, Michael Bustamante, for being with us.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.